Kawhi Leonard is out of Team USA. Jaylen Brown should have been his replacement.
Well, the Dodgers lost to the Phillies again.
Still no decision on NCAA tournament expansion.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. You are Locked On NBA.
Team USA announced this themselves, that Kawhi Leonard was dropping out of Team USA. They said they dropped this on a quote graphic, basically, which I thought was interesting. Kawhi Leonard has been ramping up for the Olympics over the past several weeks and had a few strong practices in Las Vegas. He felt ready to compete. However, he respects that USA Basketball and the Clippers determined it's in his best interest to spend the remainder of the summer preparing for the upcoming season rather than participating in the Olympic Games in Paris. Pat, the designer, what gives? Kawhi Leonard was good to go last week, 2 weeks ago, not even. Good to go, ready to go, plan. He was excited. He decided to go himself, and it sounds like he didn't even make this decision.
I think here's twofold tough on this one, right? Number one, it sounds like the Clippers stepping in yet again, but is this my wonder, right? Maybe the conspiracy theory brain that I have goes to, what was the starting lineup? Is Kawhi in there?
Whoa!
Is he okay not being in there if he's not in there? Because to me, I look at this Team USA team and I'm like, I mean, I would want Kawhi in there, but realistically, you would think that with the talent that this team has, you could go without Kawhi being in that starting lineup. Or, still conspiracy brain, you flip it, was Kawhi Leonard in the starting lineup? And the Clippers said, you're going to play him how much? Not a chance.
He's too good. So he's either not good enough or he's too good.
I don't know if it's not good enough, but I do
to be a starter.
But is that? I guess at the end of the day, it is not good enough. But you're talking about the 15 greatest players probably in the world here on this team. Yeah,
the 5 greatest players in the NBA are not on this team.
Well, I mean, listen, we know who you're rooting for. He's not even in there. Come on now.
Jokic, Luka, SGA. That's 3 out of 5. I guess you got Embiid. That one he counts.
Embiid's on there. I'm just saying, right?
Tatum.
You've assembled some of the greatest team, I would say, in this tournament, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a foregone conclusion in my mind. Everybody's like, Canada's got to give them some go. I'm like, shut up. But
you have no faith in Dylan Brooks and Lugens Dort.
I have no faith in anybody beating Team USA when Team USA goes, send the dogs.
So Kawhi Leonard's out, right? However he's out, we'll talk about the impact on the Clippers a little bit later. What I want to focus on is Mark Spears reported that Derrick White will be replacing him. So now we got 3 Celtics on there. We got Tatum already. Drew Holiday was on there already. And now Derrick White replacing him. Jaylen Brown seemed to be the obvious choice for somebody to replace him for Team USA. And as soon as the announcement came for Derrick White, Jaylen Brown posted the 3, like the monocle, like the monocle emoji.
Yeah.
He posted 3 of those. And then like 5 hours later, he posted at Nike, this is what we doing.
This is tough, right? Because I don't know if Nike has control over who makes the team or who doesn't. I don't know how that works. Well, we're back on the conspiracy theory. I feel like you missed multiple opportunities for that music in my
I had to reload it on the board.
But
it's a failure on my part.
I think here's I think here's my biggest question with this. I know who the most popular player on the Boston Celtics is, but who's the best player on the Boston Celtics?
Jason Kidd answered this during the NBA Finals and said it was Jaylen Brown, and everyone thought that it was him playing mind games, and it absolutely was. But he came right. He was the best player in the Eastern Conference Finals, the best player in the Finals, because he guarded Luka and he guarded the best players, and he did all that, and he put up, the offensive numbers that he did. Like I think Jaylen, after seeing that Finals run in person there, I think that Jaylen Brown was better than Jason Tatum. Do I think Tatum has been better in his career? Yes. Yeah, I think Tatum's been better in his career. But if you're looking at right now, the 2 guys making $300 million over the next couple of years, I think Jaylen Brown has been better. And I think Jaylen Brown should have absolutely made this team. I think that he can do a bunch of stuff. I think he can play defense as, he can bring what Derrick White can bring defensively. I thought some people saying they don't need another scorer, they need another defender. All right, well, Jaylen Brown can do that. He guarded Luka the entire finals.
He's arguably the best two-way player in the NBA.
He can do that, and you already have a couple. But the reason why I bring up the Nike thing and why Jaylen Brown tweeting at Nike, "This is what we doing," and you think that it's connected to this at all, is because a couple of years ago, there was a report that Nike founder Phil Knight says Kyrie Irving stepped over the line when the Nets player shared an anti-Semitic film on Twitter, and Jaylen Brown quote tweeted that story and said, "Since when did Nike care about ethics?" And I think that there's a connection between it, because Nike is all involved in Team USA, all the jerseys, all the sponsorships, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff, you don't want to go to like tinfoil hat, but just go like think about how these corporations work and like, dude, is that who we want representing Team USA and all that kind of stuff? Like we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but there's a send-off dinner with Obama.
It is true, I am the hooper in chief.
And like, does Nike want Jaylen Brown there when he's questioning the ethics of Nike and doing that kind of stuff? Like, you saw what they did to Kyrie. Like, I don't know. I'm just saying that if I'm gonna go full conspiracy, I think this is part of it.
See, my wonder is this something, right, where I would think if the coaches wanted him there, if the players wanted him there, I would think that he would be there. I understand the hold that Nike has, but like here's the thing. To go with not only a Boston Celtic, but his teammate who none of us think that he's better than, that's where my ears poke up. And maybe I'm asking, okay, is there maybe some beef on possibly with one of the coaches or the head coach of it? Or is there some ruffled feathers with some of the players on the team? Is this an Isaiah Thomas situation with Jaylen Brown, where you're sitting there looking at it going like, as Isaiah Thomas said, I met the criteria to be selected.
You think the finals MVP meets the criteria?
I mean, not only the finals MVP, but you said, you think that Jason Tatum has had a better career long term. I think that we haven't talked about Jaylen Brown selling in the playoffs. Like to any point. Like I think Jaylen Brown has been
the other year we talked about he can't dribble with his left hand. That's what people were talking about the whole time with Jaylen Brown. And he just got the biggest contract ever and doesn't deserve it.
That's true. Yeah, I'll give you that one.
I mean, he was very good this run. Like I'm not gonna put it past him that
a lot of right-handed dribbling though.
There was a lot of right-handed dribbling.
He was going to the right a lot. Nobody learned from the Heat.
And he's like, I'll show you, and started dribbling with his left and turned it over, and we were like, But I think Jaylen Brown is a snub, and I don't know if I believe the full conspiracy of the Nike of it all and everything, but there's something, and maybe they just wanted another guy that can fit. They didn't want another personality. They didn't want another like ego in the bunch. You've already got LeBron James, Steph Curry, Devin Booker, Tatum, Durant. Like that's Embiid. It's a lot of mouths to feed there, so maybe they didn't want to go that direction. Maybe Tatum was like, hey, I kind of want a break from the, is it him? Is it his team or my team?
Yeah.
Would we do that with Team USA?
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
You are Locked On Dodgers.
And the Dodgers lost 4-3 to the Phillies. This one, it was a lot better than yesterday. Like Matty Man Dodge says in the chat, a heck of a lot better than yesterday. We were in this one at least, and not just in it. I mean, the two deciding runs for the Phillies scored on defensive flukes. Doesn't mean they don't count. That's not an excuse. It's to say this game really could have gone either way. The 2 runs in that inning, Gavin Stone gave up Like the first 3 batters, it was a fly out to center and 2 ground outs to second base. That should have been the inning. Instead, it turned into a 2-run inning because the fly out to center turned into a triple, and then they got 2 infield singles. It's dumb. It's baseball. It happens. But, who knows what would have happened if Gavin Stone, if Andy Paez doesn't lose that fly ball. It's a 1-2-3 inning. In the 5th inning, Stone probably comes out, pitches the 6th inning. Who knows what would happen? Maybe Stone blows up in the 6th inning. I'm not saying they should have won. I'm saying it was just a weird way to lose. And this game looked like a battle between 2 teams that are fairly evenly matched. 2 really good baseball teams playing pretty well. Unlike yesterday, this game had starting pitchers for both teams who will be postseason pitchers for the teams. That wasn't the case yesterday. The Phillies had maybe their best pitcher, Zach Wheeler, going against Bobby Miller, who is now in AAA, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. But Bobby Miller won't be pitching for the Dodgers in the postseason unless something drastically changes. Yesterday's version of Bobby Miller definitely won't be pitching the postseason for the Dodgers, and the Phillies were. And again, like I know people always misinterpret things to. I'm not saying that's not an excuse for. I mean, Bobby Miller sucked yesterday, which sucks for him, sucks for the Dodgers. But this game tonight was a game between 2 first place teams that looked like they were both really good teams. And the Phillies came out on top, and it very easily could have been the other way. And that's okay. Like, this is what I expected coming into the series. Of course, coming into the series, I expected Tyler Glasnow to be pitching tomorrow. He won't be. I hoped that Bobby Miller would show up a little bit more. I expected 3 close games and one of the teams to win 2 out of the 3. This game was kind of what I expected. And I think when you look at, the Phillies are missing Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto. The Dodgers didn't have Mookie Betts or Max Muncy or Will Smith in the lineup in this game. Plus, they didn't have whoever they're going to get at the trade deadline. So it's hard to read too much into. I just did, right before I started this, I did a little spot for the Locked On Sports Today podcast talking about the Dodgers. And the fact is, we don't know what the Dodgers team will look like in October because there are absolutely obvious glaring holes for this team. That's not often the case for those. Usually there's at the trade deadline, it's here's a little way they could improve the team. Here's a marginal improvement. No, this team has needs, and that's kind of a good thing because it means that they're going to have to be active if anybody sells. That's my only concern is that with 85% of the league making the playoffs, maybe teams aren't going to be willing to sell. If there are teams selling, the Dodgers are going to be buying. So we'll have to see what the Dodgers team looks like in October. Theoretically, Mookie Betts will be back. Theoretically, Max Muncy will be back or replaced one way or another. And the Dodgers will have, like, the only guy in the Dodgers' current starting rotation who is likely to pitch for them in October is Gavin Stone. Everybody else, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, they're not on the roster. Clayton Kershaw, who knows what he's going to be. Walker Buehler, Bobby Miller, these guys, we don't know what the Dodgers are going to have. But Stone's the only one who's a lock to pitch in the postseason, assuming he's healthy. And so it's hard to read too much into this one, which is good. And I've said this before. We spend most seasons kind of dreading the fact that how well they play in the regular season doesn't mean anything in October. This year it works in our favor. And then there's years like 2017 when the Dodgers were unbeatable all summer long, except when I was in attendance. For a span of 2.5 months, the Dodgers only lost back-to-back games twice, and those were the 4 games I went to. So I jinxed them. Other than that, they were like, I guess it wasn't 2.5 months, 2 months though. They went like 43-7, 44-7, I think. But they were 44-3 in games that I wasn't at. But so they were unbeatable all summer. And then they lost 15 out of 16, 16 out of 17 in late August, early September. They looked like the worst team in baseball. And then they went to the World Series and the other team had to cheat to win it. Like you never know. Baseball is so weird and fluky. All the Dodgers can do is try to put together as good a team as they can for October and hope that the right guys show up and they hit well in October, blah, 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 all that stuff. That's so this game, it was more fun to watch, honestly. Losing 10-1. It was kind of funny. I was just watching the postcast before I started here. And early on, Pete said, Hold on, I need to get the exact quote. He said, "It just seems to be getting worse day after day." No, losing 4-3 is much better than losing 10-1. Like from a fan enjoyment perspective, from a what does this mean, if anything, for the postseason? Like the fact is, what we saw here was the Phillies with a really good pitcher on the mound, the Dodgers with a really good pitcher on the mound, and a game of inches coming into play. That's fun. That's fun baseball. So I definitely would have preferred the Dodgers win the game, but it wasn't nearly as unfun as yesterday's game. Gavin Stone pitched pretty well. Like I said, things go differently. If Andy Paez catches that fly ball, maybe Stone gets through 6 innings and in line for a win. Giving up 4 runs in 4 2/3 innings looks a lot worse than what he pitched. He only allowed 1 hard hit ball in that inning, and that was the last pitch he threw, the double to Alec Boehm. Other than that, he pitched pretty well. I still do have some nagging concerns about Stone's lack of strikeouts. I do think what we saw here was sometimes when you can't get the strikeouts, you get weak contact instead. And sometimes weak contact drops in or turns into an infield single, especially when it's Trey Turner running, all those things. So I would like Gavin Stone to strike out more guys, but really it's hard to quibble too much with his performance tonight against a really good Phillies team. Even without Bryce Harper, it's still a really good team. Very good offensive team, good pitching, and the Dodgers were right in it. Feels like a moral victory or something, a cop out, but yeah, it was more fun than losing 10-1. That's just
You are Locked On Hawks.
Vit Krejci is back with the Hawks. So after a 3-month saga, basically dating back to the Hawks not converting him from his 2-way contract at the end of the regular season, which is certainly controversial. It was 3 months ago now, but that made him ineligible to play in the play-in game against the Bulls. That was not the best thing for the Hawks to try to win in that moment, but it did, of course, lead in sort of a roundabout way to the Hawks losing and then also having the lottery success that they had. And then Krejci finished the year on a 2-way contract. That made Krejci's qualifying offer to be restricted free agent another 2-way contract. And that made that an absolute no-brainer. And he's been a restricted free agent for about 2 weeks now. I've been saying really for the entire time that it was always extremely likely that he'd be back with the Hawks on a multi-year contract. And that came to pass on Wednesday. Woj reported on Wednesday afternoon that Krejci agreed to a 4-year contract worth about $10 million. I've had that confirmed since then by the Hawks. Not that Woj needs my help to confirm reports, but that is the case. The Hawks have not announced that just yet as I'm recording this podcast at, 2 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday morning, but that is going to be coming probably on Thursday from the Hawks side. As far as details are concerned, it's kind of sparse right now, even several hours after the initial news broke. Let's just say the roundabout way that I've heard about this is basically a 4-year deal for Krejci at his minimum every season. So basically his minimum contract possible for 4 years adds up to about $10.2 million. So basically exactly what that was reported by Woj. You have to assume based on that it would kind of be his minimum all the way through. Now, the deal kind of does swing on whether there are any non-guarantees or team options or player options. And right now, again, early morning Thursday, I don't know the answer to that question. I've been trying to find out for the last few hours, and I've not been able to do that. But that's important. We'll kind of follow up on that later on, but we do not know just yet if there is any sort of team favorability beyond the cheapness of the contract or if you got a player option. We will see in the coming days. As a kind of recap of where he is, Vit just turned 24 years old. It's been a mixed career so far for Vit, I have to say, but he had this really, really intriguing 18, 20 game stretch at the end of the year. He was pushed into the action by the Hawks by injuries. He hadn't played really at all. Instead, they went from not playing at all season to starting and basically playing a lot of minutes out of necessity. But he defended at the best level of his career during that stretch. He shot it well from 3 on a pretty small sample size, I will say. But he's always had the ability to kind of dribble, put the ball on the floor and pass and play make a little bit for his size at 6'7", 6'8". His defensive growth this year is really impressive, going back to his work in College Park with the G League, a la what's happened with a lot of guys that have gone down there in the last year or so. The swing skill with Vit is probably his jump shot. He's been like a 30%-ish three-point shooter in his career so far, which is not great, of course, even going back to the G League, but he flashed more than that at the end of this year. It looked better mechanically. If that holds up, or the defense holds up, or both, ideally, this becomes a really, really good contract for the Hawks. We'll kind of go through the roster later on in the show, but in the end, I was expecting Christian to be back on a deal kind of like this, relatively cheap, multi-year contract that's team friendly, and that's where the Hawks ended up in this spot. Part of that is that the team had so much leverage. Unless there was another team that was like lining up to give Veit an offer sheet, which I don't think was out there for him at this point in time, that was the only way that it wouldn't be really friendly to the Hawks. They had a lot of leverage here, and that puts the player in a tough spot, I have to say. And honestly, for Veit, it's a lot of money, obviously. $10 million, if it's all guaranteed, it's a lot of money for a lot of people, but it's not a great contract for the player side. It's very team friendly, I think, at this point in time, such as life. He'll be in a battle for playing time with guys like Reese Shea and Dyson Daniels, Garrison Matthews, et cetera, this year. But you simply put cannot have too many wings in the NBA. That's where they are at this point in time. He adds to that and has a nice, very intriguing skill set with his defense that he showed up this year with. And again, Hawks fans, I would say, have to be thrilled with this deal on the whole. The short version is if he played like he did last year, which is, again, is not a given by any means, but if he can do that over a larger sample size, this deal becomes an absolute and total heist for the Hawks. If he doesn't maintain that level, it's still so cheap that it's fine. Even if he's like the 13th guy on your team, making $2.5 million a year on average, that's totally fine. So there really is very little downside here for the Hawks. It's only upside. And again, if he's the player he was at the end of last year, which is, again, it's a big if, but if that player still exists moving forward, that'd be a very, very good outcome for the Hawks and a great contract. So overall, an excellent piece of business for the Hawks, I would say, to negotiate this pretty hard, lock Veit into multiple seasons at a very team-friendly number. Great stuff there. And for Veit, some more security that he's had before. And there you go on that. On the other side of things, news-wise, Saddiq Bey is in the news and not coming back to the Hawks. So I've talked about this for, 2 weeks now, about the Hawks and Bey still talking about bringing him back to Atlanta potentially, even after the Hawks did not give him a qualifying offer on June 29th. One reason why that actually didn't do that is because Bey might have just signed that qualifying offer for 1 year, and that would put the Hawks owing him like $8+ million for one season. And as a reminder, Saddiq tore his ACL. So he's going to be out for probably at least half or more of this season, could be the whole year, et cetera. So what you don't want to have happen if you're the Hawks is to pay a 1-year deal and have him leave at the end of it without having actually played for you. So anyway, his market was not robust because of the injury, from what I heard. But in the end, he ends up agreeing to a 3-year, $20 million contract with the Wizards. This is a far cry from what Saddiq was probably going to get without the injury. And the Hawks offered, I would say, considerably more than this. I've heard different numbers, but I would say, let's just say considerably more than this. They were offering him a year ago in an extension. There was back and forth there. The two sides could not find an agreement on a middle ground, which is not anything out of the ordinary. It does happen. Every year there's a guy or two or three or four or five that just cannot find an extension. So that's not anybody's fault. But Bey's number was higher than the Hawks number that they were willing to give him. So all that said, fast forward a year, this is pretty unfortunate for Saddiq, as we talked about a lot. He's a guy that everybody likes, including me. He had really bad luck with the injury on top of the shooting struggles from this year in particular. But anyway, the Hawks could have given him this deal, but it would have given him a complicated tax picture. And from what I've heard, they were not really in on Bey still if the market was robust. If the market had fallen off on Saddiq like all the way, they could have brought him back at a cheap number. It would not have surprised me at all. They were still talking in the last couple of days and weeks. But anyway, this is a very modest deal if Saddiq is still the guy he was pre-injury. And I know Hawks fans soured on him this year. I understand that he didn't play as well as he did previously. The shooting was the biggest part of that. But even as someone who was kind of early on Saddiq being a little bit overvalued by some Hawks fans a year ago, this is still a really good contract for that kind of player if he's able to play again within the next year. But I don't think the Hawks have any interest at all in paying the tax right now, from what I can gather. And this would have put them kind of in that mark. Plus, he was not restricted anymore. So even if the Hawks had offered him this contract, he might have just chosen to go to Washington because, number one, he is from there. Number two, they have a lot fewer bodies in front of him and maybe a little bit longer leash. So I don't know that to be sure, but I just keep that in mind. It was not like the Hawks could have auto-matched this on their own. Saddiq might have wanted to go somewhere else. So we'll see on that. But I could go longer on this if I wanted to, dating back the Hawks trading for him a year and a half ago. And then ultimately at the end of this, losing him for nothing doesn't look great. The price was 5 second-round picks. It was a lot, I would say, not like crazy for a guy who was cheap, but it didn't work out that well for anybody involved. I am happy for Saddiq because he at least got some security with that $20 million given the injury stuff. Hopefully he gets healthy and gets back on the market in a couple of years, makes some more money in his career. For the Hawks side, I'm not surprised. This is kind of where things ended up. Bey getting a real offer was kind of changing things there. Again, I think the only way the Hawks are going to bring him back by the end of this is if he didn't have many other options. So They didn't match this or beat it necessarily, but I think it's at least possible again that he could have just wanted to go home to DC. But regardless, good for him. And the Hawks will move on without him at this point in time. And again, that's not a surprise. He was still on my radar, but I've kind of been planning that it was more likely than not that he would not be back for the Hawks. And now we know he's not going to be back for the Hawks. He's heading to Washington. The Hawks will see him 4 times a year as long as he's with the Wizards.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down as the first pitch gets closer with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts, it's the best place to find last-minute tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, comedy, concerts, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users will get $20 off of their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You are Locked On College Basketball.
On Wednesday evening, Matt Norlander, CBS Sports, sent out a tweet. I don't know why I said sent out a tweet. That makes me sound like a grandpa. Well, he sent out a tweet. Matt Norlander tweeted this regarding NCAA tournament expansion. Quote, the NCAA men's basketball committee has wrapped its annual summer meetings with no decision in on whether or not to expand the NCAA tournament, sources tell CBS Sports, end quotes. What? I don't understand why we're leaving these meetings with no decision. You're either going to do it or you're not. You've been talking about it forever. It's time to pee or get off the pot, right? Is that the quote? Something like that. You know what you're going to do, right? Like that's the thing. And I just don't get it. So more from Norlander's tweets. Quote, the topic was discussed, the topic being expansion, at length on Tuesday, and remains up for debate for many reasons. Arguably, the biggest being the significant financial commitment, millions more in expenses, that would come with expanding the men's and women's fields. There's no timeline on a verdict. Again, why not? There are other notable updates regarding the NCAA tournament that were approved and will be announced Thursday, sources said. So first off, those other updates, obviously I'm recording this on Wednesday for Thursday. When we learn what those things are today on Thursday, Andy and I will talk about those other updates on Friday's show. So stay buckled up for that. That'll be fun. But interesting, this whole thing about the expenses. Here's why. The big thing we've been told all along is that the whole reason these commissioners and everybody are wanting to get in on this is because more money. It's all about the money grab. Money, 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 money. More teams for me, more teams in, more money in. But the thing here is, we got to remember, you bring in more teams, there's a bunch of more money that's got to go out as well. And so clearly that's a hang up in this thing. So let me just say this. I feel zero sympathy to these power conference commissioners who want more teams, translation, who want their more teams in the NCAA tournament. You're the ones that put yourselves in this position. You made the bed of beefing up your conferences, and now you got to lie in that bed. And I'm not trying to help you out with watering down my NCAA tournament so that you can get more of your middling or sub 500 teams into that entity, the greatest single thing we have in all of collegiate athletics. So miss me with that over and over and over again. This is an issue of your own making. Don't make the rest of us suffer because of it. My bottom line, leave this thing alone. I always say, if you're going to do anything, go back to 65. If you feel like you got to tinker downwards, down to 64. Don't tinker upwards anymore. And look, I know that's never going to happen. It's just some silly world where I think we might actually ought to have a tournament bracket that actually just fits 64 teams. Wow, how crazy would that have been to go back to? which is why we got to 68. Let's remember that. We're just appeasing people that were throwing out a 96 team field. So it's like, what if we gave you a couple more, right? So anyway, I know it will never happen to go back to 64, but that seems to make more sense than going bigger. I digress. Now, a couple other reminders on this from Matt Norlander's reporting earlier in the week. The NCAA is considering 3 options on what to do. Of course, again, none of which are going back to 64 teams. But option number 1, just let a sleeping dog lie, meaning stay at 68 teams. Option 2, increase to 72. Option 3, increase to 76. Why? Come on, man. Just leave it. Leave it alone. So, and here's part of it you got to know too. The NCAA is not going to move when this event is played. It's not going to move to May. It's not going to start earlier or later. Here's why. You may or may not be aware that basically the schedule of our sport of college basketball is determined by the Masters. It's kind of like the church calendar. Everything's determined by when Easter falls in a given year. So the Final Four for both men and women is always played the weekend before the Masters. So like the men's Final Four is always Saturday. The men's championship game is always Monday. And that's going into Masters week. On the front end of this, the other thing is part 2, the NCAA is not going to move when conference championship week is. That's going to stay as well. So, you get some like Big 12, ACC end on Saturday, Big 10, SEC end on Selection Sunday the next day. You're going to have Selection Sunday, and then you got this 3-week window that you got to get it in. And I know the women's is a little bit truncated. They play on a tighter schedule, but the men are not going to change from their Thursday, Sunday, Saturday, Monday thing, meaning you can't add days into this thing. You've got Tuesday and you got Wednesday for your playing games, nothing else. So any extra teams you add, they got to get in on those 2 days somehow, some way, somewhere. That's what we're talking about. So I just, there you go. There you have it. End of the day. And you should go back and read Matt Norlander's article about this, where he lays out 5 reasons that expansion is both undesirable and unnecessary. And I completely agree with him on it. And I'll just say a couple other, let me just burn through those really quick. Number 1, most sports fans are against expansion. Yeah. I mean, that is the thing. It's like, I get commissioners, you're just going to do what you're going to do. Who cares what the fans think? But you're making money because of our eyeballs. If our eyeballs don't care as much about your watered down event, then the televising partners aren't going to re-up or give you more money. And also, we shouldn't blame the NCAA as much on this. They're simply doing their due diligence. It's the commissioners and ADs and head coaches, some of them, who are pushing for this expansion. Like Greg Sankey, for me, has always been the face of the evil empire on this thing. And the NCAA committees are just doing their due diligence to look into it. Now, my frustration with them, again, comes because they haven't made a decision yet, whereas they should. Norlander's second point is that expansion won't bring much more money, if any. Here's the thing there. TBS, CBS, or Turner and CBS have already negotiated. There's a deal in place through the 2032 tournament. And there are 0 guarantees that they're going to go back and renegotiate because you add 4 or 8 more teams to this tournament. But if you add 4 or 8 more teams to this tournament, as we said a minute ago, that adds a bunch of expense to this thing that you're not getting much more money back for. And then ultimately, if you're one of these commissioners who's just trying to get more money, it's pointless, right? So the money's just not there. Simple math, more money out, same money in is a loss. Point 3 from Norlander, expanding amid uncertain times would be short-sighted. This one just makes logical sense. There's been so much upheaval across the collegiate sports landscape lately. NIL, transfer portal. We're just getting into this massive realignment literally right now. We haven't even seen the dust settle on it yet. Wouldn't it make a ton of sense to let the dust settle before you go changing the best single entity you have, NCAA, right? Like it feels like that should be obvious to me, but apparently it's not. So there's that. And then Norlander's last 2 points, minor expansion in the tournament will worsen scheduling for mid-majors. And then the fifth one, Pac-12's death guarantees more at-large bids for the big boys. And so if that's what they're trying to expand for, is to get more bids, you've already done that, because those bids that the Pac-12 was getting, they averaged 4.3 bids over the past decade. Those aren't going to mid-majors. You know how this works. It's the big boys that are going to get them. So you've already got those. Why do you need more? Keep it where it is. Do not change the NCAA tournament. If you're going to change anything, again, go back to 64. Other than that, leave it alone. This is the best thing we have. Stop trying to screw it up.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
You are Locked On MLB.
All right. If you are at all following baseball right now, you know that the Yankees are in an absolutely bizarre state right now. If we turn the world backwards, go back in time like Superman did in Superman the movie, on June 14th, which is almost a month ago, the Yankees had the best record in baseball. They were 50-22, 3.5 games ahead of Cleveland, and they were tied in the loss column, but 3 games better than Philadelphia for the best record in baseball. And everything was firing on all cylinders, especially when you consider, I have an itch on my nose. The Judge had a poor first month, and Cole hadn't pitched, and the Yankees were on top of the world. And then Judge started to heat up, became the player of the month in June. Cole came back, and so naturally, how'd they do? Since that day, the Yankees are the worst team in baseball. They're 5-16. Every other team in baseball has at least 8 wins. The Rockies have won 8 games in that stretch. The A's have won 8 games in that stretch. The White Sox have won 8 games in that stretch. Hell, even the aforementioned Blue Jays have won 8 games in that stretch. The Yankees haven't won 6. They're playing, since then, they're playing .238 ball, and they've been outscored 135-100. And everything's gone wrong for the team. The hitting is terrible. The starting pitching is atrocious. The bullpen is an absolute mess. And they're also they're playing a lackadaisical brand of baseball. Runners don't know where they're supposed to be going. Center fielders are lackadaisically picking up the ball and letting other teams get the extra run. And also, they're not doing anything to piecemeal runs together. And if I were a Yankee fan, and I'm not, but if I were a Yankee fan, I would be absolutely enraged by the fact that they have gone something like, I think it's 20 games. I got to move my camera just a tiny bit. It's something like 20 games without a stolen base. Now, I'm not saying they should be acting like the 1985 Cardinals and have players stealing bases left and right. But you would think if you can't win a game and you can't score, you'd try something. You try something else. You know, if you can't hit homers, can't hit doubles, you manufacture a run. That's one of the things actually, oddly, the Red Sox have been doing is, let's go on the run. Let's manufacture something. Let's push it. And if there's ever a metaphor for what is happening with the Yankees, it's a stagnancy. You know, Raven Lunatic 11 said it best when he said the Yankees play like they expect the pinstripes themselves to go out there and win the games for them. I think you're kind of right. But I think they're also banking on a lot of things like, things will turn around. That's right around the corner. Well, there's a chance the Yankees may not make the playoffs. If they continue to play at a bad streak for another month, the Twins are red hot. The Astros are red hot. The Red Sox are red hot. The Royals are still a pretty good team. I mean, they're eventually you can run out of room. Now, I went back to a podcast I did, I think it was on August 20th of last year, where I said the Yankees have to fire Boone right now because he's clearly not all the problem, but he's clearly not part of the solution. They have to show they're addressing the problem. And a week later, I said they have to fire Cashman too. And I re-listened to those podcasts, and everything that people are saying right now about the Yankees was said last year. Poor roster construction. No one being produced out of the farm system. That's on Cashman. The team seems dead from the neck up. They're making dumb, lackadaisical plays. That's on Boone. So it's funny. The GM and the manager job of the Yankees used to be one of the most perilous jobs in baseball because you had George Steinbrenner running things and he would fire people on a dime. Now, the Pope wishes he has this job security. There's no valid reason why Brian Cashman is still the general manager of the Yankees. There's no valid reason why Aaron Boone is the manager of the Yankees. The team isn't playing well. And the longest stretch a manager has ever gone on the Yankees since they won their first championship 101 years ago, the longest a manager has gone on the Yankees without winning a pennant is Boone. Nobody's lasted this long in their history without winning a pennant. And that includes Showalter, who would have won a pennant probably if there wasn't for the strike. Or if Steinbrenner didn't let him go at the end of the 95 playoffs. But, there's all sorts of things. Jonathan Curran is given, DJ is done, Rizzo's non-existent, Volpe slumping, Glaber, Verdugo cooled big time. Gee whiz, it's almost as if the Dodgers and Red Sox knew something about Verdugo. Trent is just chilling. But you know what? This happens every year. This is on Cashman for always putting together a roster that's injury prone. And when was the last time you've heard the Yankees overachieved? Say what you want about Joe Girardi. There were a couple of years there they overachieved under on his reign. When was the last time the Yankees won a game or won a playoff series or something? We go, oh man, they gutted that one out. And also consider this. I am not taking away Brian Cashman's accomplishments in the first third of his career. He took over the Yankees in 1998. Okay. I had no gray hair then. And I didn't even know my wife. My kids are now in college. That's how long he's been there. He inherited a terrific team, but did a very good job as a general manager. Fine. The power struggle with Tampa ended in the mid-2000s, which I think, extrapolate back 20 years. That's a good number of years to judge how he's done, 20 years, where they've gone to as many World Series as the White Sox in that stretch. But do you know what? He's still at the core. They still won in 2009. Let's stretch back 10 years, shall we? That's got to be a decent sample size. Have the Yankees been an elite team for 10 years? I would say they were in 17 when they got to the Game 7 of the ALCS. I say they were I'll give them when they won 100 games in 2018 and 2019, and I'll give them 22. So 4 times in the last 10. I'll stretch it back to 11 years. 4 times in the last 11 years, they've been an elite team. And even those years, they didn't go to the World Series. How many times in the last 10, hell, stretch it back 11 years. How many times in the last 11 years have the Yankees won the division? Twice. 2 times they've won the division in the last 11 years. Under his watch, the one great achievement he had was putting together the 2017 team and rebuilding without a tanked year. But who's left from that 2017 team? Judge. That's it. And they're nowhere near a World Series right now.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down as the first pitch gets closer with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts, it's the best place to find last-minute tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, comedy, concerts, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users will get $20 off of their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You are Locked On Cougs.
Yormark said that the Big 12 and thus Houston are still open for business. Now, everyone asked questions about realignment and stuff like that. Continue to expand the Big 12. Direct questions even asked about with the ACC and their legal troubles and lawsuits and how that would impact things. All of those different questions were kind of ducked and dodged. But I will say that a Dellinger article came out on Wednesday to follow up Big 12 Media Day, and it ties a lot of the dots together, ties a lot of the loose ends together here, connects a lot of the dots here between a bunch of different things. So the Dellinger article clearly lays out that there is a pathway to bring Florida State and Clemson to the Big 12 amidst all of this chaos. You'll remember in the national media that both Florida State and Clemson are suing the ACC for the ability to get out of their grant rights deals, to pursue other options, et cetera, et cetera. It does feel like the Big Ten and SEC are staying pat. It would have to kind of be some landing spot for them theoretically out of all of that. And the presumed other option, because once they leave the ACC, they've upset the ACC, and because theoretically the Big Ten and SEC maybe don't want to redivvy up the pie or what have you, is the Big 12. The big issue to this point has been money. How would you pay them enough money to A, potentially get out of that suit, or B, or get that suit and get out of the grant rights, or B, to make it worth their while to come to the Big 12 over the ACC and cause all this chaos in the first place? Could you find some way to maybe in an uneven distribution pay them more than the Big 12 schools currently are getting or will be getting after 2025 or whatever, right? And the other big deal of all that is if you can add them to your brand's portfolio as the Big 12, then in 2030, when in January of 2030, the Big 12 is doing this whole rigmarole with the TV contracts up again, then theoretically your brand is bigger, stronger, better, more valuable, and you're really looking at a true big three in the conferences game, right? If you can add brands like Florida State and Clemson. It's been a pipe dream for a while, but Dellinger connected dots based on things that Yormark said at Media Day. The biggest thing here is that Yormark was not definitive on what aspect they would use private equity for, but was firm in his discussions that it was the kind of thing they were looking into in the future of this. And to Yormark's credit, he mentioned that pro sports and pro sports franchises and pro sports leagues you've seen been involved with private equity at various points. It's kind of the way of the future. And in this model where there's such big revenue happening in college sports, big dollars being passed around, it would make sense that it's going to be the next domino to fall in that. And it would make sense that you don't want to be the last of the college conferences to do that. You'd rather be first, right? So private equity coming in adds a lot of money. We talked about it on this show before. If you missed the episode a while back, private equity would come in theoretically. I think the number is pitched around like at a 20% share would escalate the value of the conference triple fold or something like that, right? And the thought would be that the private equity, they put their money in, fuel it, run it, try and maximize profits, etc. They want to get out with more profit. They want their percentage to be worth more than they put into it at the end of the private equity's contract, right? That's the whole point, is it absorbs value. Now, I've been anti that, and I would still be, in a lot of fronts, anti that. But if private equity is a pathway to adding brands to the Big 12 like Florida State and Clemson, that is a long-term profitability and viability that becomes kind of hard to ignore. Now, I still think that there are drawbacks to involving private equity in the day-to-day college sports, but if the private equity firm allows you to have enough money to help Florida State, Clemson, and whomever else get out of the grant of rights deal, if it allows you to pay them at what might be an uneven distribution, but something between what the ACC and Big Ten SEC are paying, right, somewhere in there, okay, you get somewhere in the middle there to pull them in and so on, that becomes, at least in my opinion, a chance for the rising tide to lift all boats. And that's what Dellinger is saying could happen if you're connecting what Yormark's comments on private equity were and this lingering lawsuit and board meeting happening in Florida State next week and all these different things, right? And as Dellinger said, this is eerily similar to the timing of last year when there's all this smoke around Colorado leaving the Pac-12 about this time a year ago. And then by the end of July, all four corner schools were coming to the Big 12, right? Like that all happened very much in a, similar timing of the year and kind of fashion. Now, Yormark has said that he had never thought of the conference can be too big. He wants to add big brands. He wants to go coast to coast. He's talked a lot more about the West Coast, to be fair, but you can't pass up a Florida State, right? If that's really on the table in all of this. For Houston, this is the Houston Cougars show, Locked On Cougs. I do think private equity in a vacuum sucks the value and a lot of the things we like about college sports out of it. Some of the things that we would consider valuable traditions aren't financially valuable. Those might go by the wayside, right? The second and third strength coaches, you'd be doing value assessments and say, like, do we really need those, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Passing off the buck on different expenses to the customer, right? Whatever. But if the goal is to be a long-standing college football program, adding Florida State and Clemson to the Big 12 feels like it cements that, because the Big 12 very quickly becomes, assuming the ACC crumbles, because I don't think it lasts without them, Big 12 quickly becomes one of the three power conferences, and it cements itself as such for a long time. Further, from a regionality standpoint, Big 10, couple West Coast schools, north. SEC, south. Big 12, everything else, right? The Houston would be in that conference is important because that conference would feel too big to just go away. It also is a conference that'd be up for a new TV deal in 2030, which we'll talk about some over the course of the show today. But that means that you would theoretically be around for another while longer because that TV deal could be way higher with these other schools in the conference. And if it were really a conference that felt like on the same playing field as SEC in the Big Ten, right? So if the private equity thing were to happen and come through Houston or come through the Big 12 and thus Houston and not net you these other big brands, I worry the negatives outweigh the positives. However, if there is some sales pitch you're throwing me here, as Dellinger's connecting amongst these quotes, and there is a Florida State board meeting happening very soon, if this is all in an effort to make the conference a real competitive player in the top echelon of college athletics, then as much as I have my druthers, this does help Houston in the long run because it makes Houston one of the schools in a conference you cannot ignore. It just does. And college football is changing dramatically. Think about where we are today versus 24 months ago versus 48 months ago, let alone 10 years ago. Who knows where we're going to be at 2030. but you need to continue to grow and get into that top echelon as fast as possible, because otherwise you're going to get left behind. And if you're left behind, there's no guarantee you ever get back. Houston fought and clawed and fought really hard to get back the first time once they were left out of the Big 12 and when the Southwest Conference dissolved. There's no guarantee that you survive a second claw and fight back.